I'd like to welcome everybody again to this is a public forum section.
Political context is slightly different. In many ways, cluster munitions is a bigger challenge because there are a lot more states who have cluster munitions and a lot more who've used them. We've got real concerns at the minute that new weapon systems like the F-35, the Joint Strike Fighter that's being developed between the US, Norway, who should know better, and Australia and various other NATO states and the UK, is being designed to fire DU ammunition. We challenged the UK on this, and they're claiming they don't have any need for a front cannon in their version of the strike fighter. So, like Eurofighter, it's going to have a lump of concrete in the nose instead of a cannon, which fair play to them, I think. And plus, the geopolitical situation is different post 9/11 to that which the landmine campaign encountered 10 years ago. But the Oslo process has really sort of helped lubricate the disarmament wheels over the last 12 to 18 months. We've had a lot more interest from states, and they've been a lot more willing to listen to us because there's been this real energy about cluster munitions. To begin with, it was they've been struggling for quite a while, and then Israel, when they invaded Lebanon in 2006, they used 4 million cluster munitions in the last 48 hours of conflict. Number of tanks, the vast majority of which were spread over. Not great really. They weigh 60 tons each. You've got to get them to where you need them to be. They use a vast amount of diesel, and obviously armies are very worried about their carbon footprint these days. So it's unlikely that we're going to see a similar sort of symmetric warfare in that respect. But that's worrying because we're going to see asymmetric warfare where civilian populations are increasingly threatened by either military activities within civilian areas or non-state parties who are then targeted. Although we have very good working relationships with Euromil, who's an umbrella organisation of 36 military trade unions from around Europe, and the vast majority of them are actually becoming very aware of the need to avoid explosive and toxic remnants of war, and some that they're counterproductive when it comes to winning hearts and minds. We don't have troops themselves, we have mostly anecdotal evidence, photographic evidence, but nothing peer-reviewed because of the challenges of working in Iraq. What we don't know, the level of exposure that can cause harm and that is experienced by Iraqi civilians. We don't know the true extent to which ill health is caused by DU or other environmental and social factors, and we don't know the effects of long-term contamination in Iraq. And we need clear, peer-reviewed epidemiological data on cancer rates, and from areas where DU munitions have been used. So it's quite challenging to campaign on something where we have a certain amount of evidence suggesting there's something wrong, further evidence which also backs that up, but we don't have this huge epidemiological study where we can go, so it's not like we've led, where even that took 20, 30 years of denial from industry and from governments that there's any problem. It's that sort of thing that we're facing at the moment. Because uranium, as far as the nuclear industry is concerned, uranium's always been seen as a bit, could be worse. It could be polonium-210. We're surrounded by it all the time. We've got uranium miners who mined uranium, and not that many of them got ill, but they were being exposed to completely different particles to those that people who are exposed to DU are exposed to, and yet it's always brought up as the evidence to challenge DU. So we run our domestic campaign. I've been very busy with the international work, so we've not had huge success in the UK of late. However, our partners, for example in Belgium, they formed a 21-member domestic coalition between, they pulled in some of the large NGOs like Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace. They had a very flexible structure, which meant they could respond very quickly to changing political situation, which can be a real challenge for us. We had a very good relationship with Italy up until Berlusconi got in a few months ago. We were down with the produce for some time, but things have changed. They had a real champion, Dirk van der Malen, who was one of the Flemish socialists, and he's been incredible. Pushed it right up through all the sorts of various hearings and committees in the Belgian government until they finally managed to get a ban. Plus they had a precedent. They banned landmines and they banned clusters. They were first in the world to do both, and so they, I think, felt a bit of an urge to try and be the first to ban depleted uranium as well. We've got some good people working in Finland. They've got a 12-member coalition, and they've been very, very effective. They've held exhibitions in the Finnish Parliament. They've got 6 of the 7 Finnish political parties on side. Unfortunately, that's only a 49% majority in the Finnish Parliament, or minority in the Finnish Parliament. But when we've been out in Geneva, we've been in touch with Finland, and their diplomat, the main ambassador, has been happy to see us. And you get the feeling that he's been pecked from his government because his government is being pecked by a bunch of middle-aged women who are on the phone to him all the time and writing letters and generally harassing their politicians. He seemed very under the weather, the poor man. But, so it can be very effective. It's just a case of pulling together a wide coalition of people who are willing to work on it. We do a lot of work with the European Parliament. Caroline Lucas has been great, and the rest of the European Greens. We've had 4 votes for a moratorium now. The final one calls for an outright ban. And then last May we had an amazing one, which we wrote most of, which was passed by 491 or 521 votes, which called for more research, an EU-wide moratorium and monitoring of sites where DU is being used, and called for EU states to work towards a global treaty banning DU. And we had this incredible landslide votes, even from the parties on the right. So that's been amazing. We just wish the European Parliament had a bit more power, but being able to bring up this resolution when we're out lobbying is a really good tool. So at the United Nations as well, we hold seminars in Geneva. We've had quite a good response from there because a lot of them they get sent to Geneva for 3 years to work on nuclear weapons, and it doesn't really get anywhere. And so they seem to be quite welcome of having something else to get their teeth into. So they've been quite interested. We've had a good resolution passed at the General Assembly last year, which was backed by Cuba and Indonesia and the non-aligned movement. But it needs support on a domestic scale as well. It's fine, we can get this stuff done internationally, but unless these governments are being hectored and badgered at home, then we never really get anywhere. Going back to New York at the start of October with a stronger resolution, we hope to get some. And we're sort of winning at the moment. It's great. We're getting some real sort of traction internationally. We have a day of action every year on November 6th. We're continuing to gather information and data and peer-reviewed studies. We're sort of pushing ourselves now as the logical next step, as the next inhumane weapon system that needs to be banned after cluster munitions. We're reaching out and building a wider coalition internationally. We're still trying to find that suitable celebrity endorser. Tricky though. We're continuing to work with the European Parliament particularly, and continuing our work at the UN. And we wanted to try and we've been looking into disinvestment campaigns. We've got a really good study which Barclays and Royal Bank of Scotland, oddly enough, both big investors in DU weapons, so if you do bank with them, then there's another good reason not to. We wanted to look into continental depleted uranium free zones, which wouldn't be that big a challenge, particularly South America and Africa and elsewhere. And we're also supporting Iraqi research and trying to help with the provision of medical assistance. We've organised conferences of medical professionals in Germany have training days. We're realistic about how far the campaign can go at the UN because of the problems around the certain conventional weapons. That would be their traditional forum for dealing with something like this, and yet it's completely flawed, like many of the UN mechanisms, and it's completely down to the interests of China and the US, and it's like the Conference on Disarmament, which hasn't really moved for years because of China and the US arguing about space weapons. It's a similar thing that the CTW never really does anything unless it has to. At the moment they're struggling to try and come up with an alternative text on cluster munitions, which they're going to try to release a couple of weeks before people start signing the Oslo Treaty in Oslo in December. So they've been trying to play catch up and try and bring their own text to the table, but yeah, it's inherently flawed. But the UN is very useful for it's good to go to Geneva because they don't really do much. They're all a bit bored, seemingly, and so they're willing to talk to us, and also we can get awareness globally by passing resolutions in New York. So,
in other words, the obstacle security council to use the General Assembly.
Mm-hmm.
So, you say China is difficult, is it?
Yes. They abstained at our resolution last year because it had been submitted by Cuba. But we had, I think it was 5 states voted against, which was half a pint for anybody who could name the 5 who voted against our resolution, which was the US, Britain,
Israel,
Palau.
What?
Palau. No. Palau were on form. They were all right. No.
They're usually good fun.
It was the Czech Republic,
Yeah.
and the Netherlands. People. which was controversial, very controversial in the Netherlands itself, and caused all sorts of problems in the Parliament, which is good for us. But they were arguing over a word in the text, which is either probable or something else being with P, I forget. Anyway, so they were the only ones who voted against. We had 20 abstentions, and everybody else backed our resolution because we have an online movement. That was really good, but eventually we will get to the certain conventional weapons, and things will just hit a dead end. So.
Okay.